So, chapter 24 of Two Blue Vortex has officially hit the interwebs, and wow. What a chapter. On the surface, this chapter might seem relatively mundane to the average reader. It mostly features a fight between Kawaki and Jura, and it's far from the final battle that Kawaki, Jura, and Boruto are going to have. However, the repercussions of all of the events of chapter 24 are going to be massive. See, not only has Boruto now seemingly aligned with every single member of Team 7, that being Kawaki, Mitsuki, Sarada, and Konohamaru, but Boruto is back on his way to Konoha, a place where, mind you, the majority of the important people making governmental decisions are also Team Boruto. Tie all this into the idea that somehow, someway, Boruto is able to understand and calculate everything that Jura was going to do and make a perfect plan to battle against it, and either this boy is a genius or the idea that he's able to see into the future may be a bit more accurate than even I anticipated. And thus, with the coming of chapter 24, there is a lot to talk about, and thus we should get right into it. Therefore, with no further ado, let's get directly into Two Blue Vortex chapter 24 explained. But before we get to explaining anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're looking for one additional NC Hammer 23 video a week, you guys can go ahead and find my Naruto reaction series using the fourth wall link in my description below. We're on to the Chunin exams, and Orochimaru is doing things to scrolls I don't think you should do in front of children. So, chapter 24 does not start off where chapter 23 left off. In fact, chapter 24 starts with a flashback to the conversation that Boruto and Kawaki had on top of the Hokage stone faces, showing us that the conversation that we saw them have in chapter 15 wasn't the entirety of the conversation that they had, which is unfortunate, because in the video where we're talking about how Kawaki could have possibly known where exactly to pull up in this battle against Jura, we did identify the possibility that Boruto and Kawaki could have simply been in further communication through some kind of medium like Inajin, or that we didn't get to see all of the conversation that they had on the Hokage stone faces, and therefore they could have planned this entire attack. Those were unfortunately our two boring answers to how this fight could have played out the way that it did. Realistic possibilities, yes, but still boring. And in that video, I did state that the most interesting way that Boruto could have known exactly where to send Team 7 and knew exactly when Kawaki was going to show up in this battle against Jura would be if he somehow, someway is able to tap into the future sight ability of Momoshiki that Momoshiki canonically has. And while the reveal of additional strategizing between Boruto and Kawaki to make the entirety of last chapter possible doesn't do a whole lot of great things for that theory, the fact that Boruto is able to pretty much perfectly understand exactly how this battle against Jura was going to pan out and the best way to get in and out of it does give a little bit of credence to that theory. So it's not completely dead yet, it's just not breathing too quick. Anyways, as you can tell from my scrambling, the conversation on top of the Hokage stone faces opens with Kawaki saying, "Huh? A mission in the hidden sand?" To which Boruto responds to by saying, "Yes, there's going to be a mission in the hidden sand, and the second that Amado lifts the restrictions off you, you should come to my location. I want you with your full strength to back up Sarada and the others." Yes, that's how Boruto talks about Team 7, Sarada, and the others. Team Sumire is literally rolling in their graves right now. Boruto then tells Kawaki that him moving into this battle will likely trigger Jura's interference. But with Kawaki's help at his full strength, Boruto believes that there is a likely possibility of them being successful in this mission. But Kawaki has doubts, as Kawaki tells Boruto, "I've seen his full strength. He's the real deal, a monster. Even with us working together, I don't know if we stand a chance." But it's this point that Boruto throws Kawaki, rather appropriately, his hidden leaf-shaped pin. Nick, why is Boruto throwing Kawaki the leaf pin so important? Well, because Kawaki hasn't been moving to protect the hidden leaf basically the entire time he's lived there. However, Boruto, ironically, who is a rogue ninja to the hidden leaf right now, has been. This moment right here of Kawaki flying into combat against Jura is the first real thing he's ever done to protect Konoha. That hasn't been done out of his own self-serving interests. And thus this is, in a way, Boruto recruiting Kawaki into the aid of Konoha. Now, as Kawaki looks down on the pin in his hand, he asks Boruto, "What's this?" At which point Boruto, rather long-windedly, responds to Kawaki and says, "Listen, we can't beat Jura, at least not yet. So right now, we're simply talking about how we survive this fight. And the only real way to survive this fight is to use my flying Raijin with a long-range warp. But there's a condition that I need to clear in order to pull off a long-range warp, and that is I need to mark a specifically shaped pin with my chakra and identify it as my own. And while I'm battling against a monster like Jura, there's no way I can pick up that chakra signature from that kind of distance, and thus I need your help." And thus Kawaki immediately understands the assignment as he says, "Oh, Okay, so you just need me to make time while you focus in on that piece of metal and warp us away. And after that, we smash back to the current moment, as Jura is flying at Kawaki at full speed. And as Jura in his bird mode is descending down onto Kawaki, he fires out a tailed beast ball, but Kawaki lifts his karma palm and absorbs it. Now, I believe this is the first time we've ever seen a tailed beast ball absorbed by a karma marking. And while obviously it makes sense that a karma marking would be able to absorb a tailed beast ball, it's just interesting that it's able to do it. Now, I could be wrong, but the only people that have ever had karma markings have been Kawaki, Boruto, and Code, and none of them have ever fought a Jinchuriki. Oh wait, Jigen had a karma marking. Did Jigen ever absorb a tailed beast ball from Naruto? Probably, but I don't remember if he did. Anyways, after Kawaki absorbs the tailed beast ball into his karma marking, we see Boruto begin to rise from the ground. But as the dust settles around Kawaki from the force of him absorbing an entire tailed beast ball, he begins to look around and doesn't see Jura until Jura appears behind him. Jura then dives in with his middle finger with a swipe at Kawaki's back. Oh, and by the way, it's important to note here, because Kawaki has his karma marking out, Boruto is actively trying to suppress his own. Back to Jura and Kawaki. As Jura swipes at Kawaki's back, Kawaki shrinks himself, disappearing from Jura's now hindered view. As remember, his right eye has been destroyed with a chakra rod to the eyeball. Kawaki then, still in his small form, summons 4 of the giant blackened red squares so often used by Ishiki and Jigen to try and crush Jura with. Before one out of the 4 can fall on Jura, he charges up a tailed beast ball sniper shot and explodes the one that's heading towards him. Now, this is interesting because it's important to note here that it was these squares that were able to pin down a full-strength adult Naruto. Now, Naruto was injured in that situation, but still. Well, I guess he's not really full strength if he's injured, but you get what I'm saying. And yet Jura was rather effortlessly able to destroy one of these blocks. And yes, we're talking about Kawaki versus Ishiki/Jigen, but at this current moment in time, with 100% of his karma marking expressed and all of his limiters taken off, there's really no reason for us to believe that Kawaki is weaker than either Jigen or Ishiki. And thus this moment right here may put into perspective just how ridiculously powerful Jura is, easily comparable to that of a non-Baryon mode Naruto, because Baryon mode Naruto is just hucking these cubes. Anyways, after Jura destroys one of these cubes, Kawaki takes the opening of Jura being distracted by said cubes to fly in with his giant claw hand, slashing him backward and flying him into the cloud of dust created by the 4 falling blocks. And as Jura rises, looking for wherever Kawaki is, Kawaki appears behind him and uses an even bigger claw hand to smash Jura from behind. But as Jura skids across the ground, he gets his footing and immediately dives back towards Kawaki, lunging at him once again with his black middle finger, using this opportunity to launch a flurry of attacks at Jura that Jura mostly dodges or blocks. However, eventually Kawaki is able to knock Jura's hand back, knocking his entire momentum backwards and stabs his bow staff into Jura's stomach. Now, it's this moment that something really interesting happens. See, while to many here, the key takeaway is that the end of Kawaki's staff explodes, blowing out a section of Jura's body, showing that Kawaki can very much do damage to Jura. Before Kawaki accomplishes this, we see the karma marking on his left hand begin to go white, when in all of the scenes previous, it was completely black, like it usually is. And in the scenes immediately following this, his karma marking is back to its full black nature. But what does this mean? How does Kawaki's karma marking going slightly white in his hand allow for him to explode the end of his bow staff? I mean, by and large, we understand what a white karma marking means. It means that you're able to use the powers of the person who placed the karma marking on you, but you don't hold on to their soul. This is why Code couldn't serve as a reincarnation vessel for Ishiki. And while Kawaki also can't serve as a reincarnation vessel for Ishiki, but he's still able to use his powers, Kawaki can serve as a reincarnation vessel for Amado's daughter, Akebi. And while I don't think that's what's going to happen, Akebi's chakra and DNA do exist inside of Kawaki's karma marking. And therefore, if Kawaki places a karma marking on something like Akebi's clone, it should, after fully realizing, allow for Akebi to come back to life. But if hypothetically Kawaki's karma marking was to go entirely white, well, then he wouldn't have the ability to place karma markings or the ability to serve as a reincarnation vessel. And thus the idea that his karma marking could possibly go white would be terrifying news to Amado. It could also explain why Amado wanted Kawaki to place the karma marking on Akebi as soon as possible. But who knows? This is the kind of speculation that requires an entire video to truly dive into. So make sure you guys are hitting that noti bell because that video is coming out soon. Anyways, immediately after the bow staff explodes into Jura's chest, Kawaki then continues with the onslaught of explosive bow staff jabs, eventually blowing Jura backwards. And as this battle is going on, we see Boruto floating above it, trying to retract his karma marking in, telling himself that he's okay and that he needs to calm down. And we see that he's successful in the retraction of his karma marking as it begins to fade. We then cut back down to ground level as Kawaki is slowly but surely walking up to where Jura is slumped against a rock formation. We then see that rather appropriately, Amado and Sumire are watching this battle unfold through Kawaki's eyes. And Sumire does the worst thing that somebody in anime can do and begins to count out the antagonist, saying, "Oh my god, it's incredible that they've been able to corner Jura like this." But before she can even finish her thought, Amado cuts her off and says, "No." And it's in this moment that we see Jura reach into his own cloak and pull out his book. He then begins to maybe write, maybe read, I can't really tell, Uzumaki Kawaki. As expected, his combat ability is now far beyond what it used to be, and I'm interested to understand what Jura means here by as expected, because immediately after this he says, how did he gain such power in such a short time? Now we obviously understand that the way that he was able to gain all that power was because Amado lifted limiters off of Kawaki. But it's odd that in one statement Jura is saying, yes, of course, Kawaki got more powerful, and is in the other statement saying, I have no idea how Kawaki got more powerful. Now Jura continues on by saying, no, it's not just you, Uzumaki Himawari, who suddenly awakened right in front of me and showed the strength of an entirely different person. Now this makes me believe that Jura isn't surprised by Kawaki getting stronger, because people have been getting stronger in front of Jura for basically as long as he's been alive. And therefore it's less like Jura knew that Kawaki was going to get stronger and understood that the people around him just have the capacity to do that. Jura continues on by saying, looking back at it now, it's as if Inajin's sacrifice is what triggered it. And then also there's Sarada, who also awoke to a new kind of power and easily took down one of my kin. Jura continues his self-indulgent yap fest by saying that all of these cases are extraordinary, something that can't easily be explained by normal means. However, I feel as though all of these cases are linked. Now, it's this point that Jura closes the book and looks up at Kawaki with his one good eye, saying, right now, my hottest research topic is this thing you humans call love. It's an undeniable fact that this can absolutely be a fatal flaw. However, I also have this sneaking suspicion that the reason humans are able to undergo these massive changes in power levels is also because of love. And therefore, Jura, as he does, asks an inappropriate question at an inappropriate time, as he questions Kawaki, asking him, well, Kawaki, what do you think about love? Give me your honest opinion. To which Kawaki rather bluntly just says, you're an obnoxious pest, lifting his karma-laden left hand and beginning to charge up a massive beam of power. A beam of power comparable to the one that Kawaki used to absolutely decimate Boros. However, the beam from this karma marking is even larger than the first one we saw Kawaki use. It absolutely dwarfs him in size and supposedly destroys anything in front of him. However, as the dust settles, we hear Jura's voice as he says, now, don't get so heated. Kawaki, I just want to talk for a while. And we begin to see wood shoot out of the smoke. And we see that Jura has not only been protected from one of the strongest moves in the entirety of the Naruto universe by his wood release, but we also see he's making himself a throne out of said wood release, and that it's weaving itself into his body and healing him. Jura then lets Kawaki know that he never thought he would rush to Boruto's aid, and that as far as Jura knew, there should be only one person that Kawaki would rush to help, and that would be Naruto, all while lording over Boruto and Kawaki from his wooden-made throne. Jura continues on by telling Kawaki that he once went to go visit Naruto in the Hidden Leaf, but after going to visit him, he believed that Naruto may be dead as he couldn't sense his chakra. But now that Jura knows, after gazing upon Kawaki's unwavering eyes, that Naruto is undoubtedly alive. Now this comes as a huge surprise to Sumire, who is watching Jura through Kawaki's eyes, because, well, yes, Sumire knows that Boruto didn't kill Naruto. That doesn't mean that Sumire knows that Kawaki trapped Naruto inside of a pocket dimension. Her memories of Boruto have been unaltered, but the entire world has told her that Naruto is dead. So this is the first time that she's hearing that Naruto is still alive. And thus now, not only are people in Konoha starting to swing towards Team Boruto, but people like Sumire, Amado, and Shikamaru are becoming aware of the idea that Naruto may not be dead, as Shikamaru himself fully admits the fact that he's only keeping the seat of Hokage warm until Naruto comes back, as he doesn't believe that Naruto is gone. Even Himawari, who may or may not be under the effects of omnipotence, believes that her father is still alive. And thus the stranglehold of omnipotence is beginning to get weaker as certain key players are starting to see through the veil. Now Jura continues on by saying, "Hit the mark, didn't I? You're incredibly easy to read, Kawaki. Well listen, I'm bad at lying just like you. I went ahead and voiced the shocking truth. I want to devour Naruto. I heard he's connected with many tailed beasts, and I believe that love had something to do with it. And honestly, I can't help but feel this way." Now Jura continues to prattle on. Fortunately, it'll be over soon, as he asks Kawaki, "What is love? Maybe I'll understand it better if I consume Naruto." Now this obviously provokes a response out of Kawaki as he once again equips Giant Hand and is about to lunge at Jura until Boruto, who's seemingly fine now that Kawaki has put away his comma marking, pops down next to him. And Boruto lets Kawaki know that they're good to go now as he's had time to lock onto his symbol. Now rather interestingly, this took a long time. I mean, we see Boruto lock onto a flying Raijin symbol across dimensions in chapter 3 faster than this. But most likely the reason that it took Boruto a while to focus in on this flying Raijin symbol is because he couldn't search for the symbol while also trying to reel in his karma marking. And thus now that Kawaki has put away his karma marking, it gave Boruto enough time to find the Konoha leaf symbol. Now upon hearing that Boruto had locked onto his symbol, Jura says, "Flying Raijin. Oh, that's a shame. I guess today's over." As Jura seemingly understands that there's nothing he can do to prevent Boruto from jumping away once he gets the opportunity to use Flying Raijin. And this is an interesting dilemma for Jura to have, because Jura does technically know where Boruto is off to. While he may not know where Kashin Kochi's hideout is, there's a fair shot, like a 50% shot, that Boruto is heading back to Konoha, and therefore Jura could meet him there. However, because of Jura's fascination with Konoha, Konoha kind of operates like a safe place in tag. As long as Boruto and Kawaki are able to get back to it, Jura can't do anything to them. But before Boruto can usher off Kawaki back to home, Kawaki tells Boruto, "Hold on a second." And he turns to Jura and says, "Hey Jura, listen here and listen close. I don't care about love or any of that crap, but I'll give you credit. Your instincts for wanting to target the 7th, well, they're spot on. But don't get it twisted. One day, without fail, I'll kill you." Now, it's kind of a perplexing exchange, because basically what Kawaki is telling Jura here is like, hey, yeah, you're absolutely right. Naruto is alive, and you're well within your right to try to consume him. Because yes, he has interfaced with multiple tailed beasts, and it probably has something to do with love. And he is probably the strongest being on Earth, and therefore if you consumed him, you would get crazy power. And thus, in a sense, Kawaki is praising Jura's intuition. But while he is praising Jura's intuition, he's also letting Jura know you'll never be able to get close enough to him to consume him, because I'll kill you. But Jura appreciates this from Kawaki as he says, I appreciate the honesty. And it's this moment that Kawaki turns to Boruto and says, "I'm done here, let's go." And as Kawaki turns away, Jura says, "Kawaki, let's speak again sometime soon." But it's at this moment that Ikimoto decides to serve us quite literally the hardest panel we've ever gotten in Boruto, as Kawaki turns to Jura and flips him the bird. It's easily the greatest panel Ikimoto has ever dropped. I mean, it's aura incarnate. Exactly what we wanted from Boruto and Kawaki's relationship. It is just... Anyways, we then cut back to the rest of Team 7 and Delta kicking it a couple kilometers away, or a couple 100 kilometers away. We really have no idea how far away they are. As Konohamaru looks down at the ground at the metal leaf symbol sitting there and says, "This is Boruto's." At which point Delta tells Konohamaru that they, presumably Delta and Kawaki, were told to just leave it around there. As Boruto said, it was harder to sense the chakra placed on the metal object if somebody else was carrying it. And thus Konohamaru should actually give it a bit of distance, just in case, because if somebody stepped on it, it could mess with Boruto's ability to jump to that location. And just as Delta was telling Konohamaru this, boom, in teleports Boruto and Kawaki. And Kawaki lands squarely on Konohamaru's face. And as Kawaki looks down on the now disheveled and on the ground Konohamaru, he asks him, "What are you doing, bastard?" At which point Konohamaru gets up screaming and says, "That's our line, dumbass." Now Boruto immediately tries to defuse the situation as he apologizes to Konohamaru and says, "Sorry, sensei. Do you have the Soul Thorn?" At which point Konohamaru, still flustered by the entire sequence, says, "Yeah, I have it right here." And thus Boruto tells all of them, "All right, we're flying directly to Konoha." And thus it appears as though the Team 7 has made it out clean from their mission in the Hidden Sand, and that Moegi will most likely be reintroduced into the story in the next couple of chapters. But how will she be reintroduced? Will she get a power-up? Will she simply return to the level of power she had before being bitten? Who's to say? There's actually really no way to be certain. But if Moegi did see some kind of power-up, as As the firstborn natural wood release user Sense Hashirama, she could operate as the literal perfect countermeasure to the strongest abilities of the Shinju, rather confoundingly making Moegi an incredibly important person in the Boruto universe. But that topic right there also deserves its own video, and thus make sure you're hitting that noti bell because that video's coming out soon. Anyways, after Boruto effectively tells Team 7 that they're safe, we then cut back to Ada and Kashin Koji, who are still having a conversation. As Ada says to Kashin Koji, I was worried about what might happen, but for now, this is a massive relief. But Koji, apparently ever the pessimist, Boruto diving in here and saving all of the members of Team 7 could create an even worse future. It was far too dangerous of a gamble. I mean, Boruto's surviving. Yes, that's good news. But because of this latest action, the future is now drastically changed once again, most likely referring to all of the 10 past predictions we saw in the last chapter. However, considering the fact that in this future, Kawaki gets his limiters off and all of Team 7 survives, and both Matsuri and Ryu were killed, it's hard to see how this could possibly lead to a worse future. And that's apparently kind of how Ada feels as well. As she turns to Kashin Koji and says, well, isn't that fine though? That's how it's supposed to be. Life, I mean. Things change, futures change. And this brings up the inherent flaws in the 10 paths prediction ability. I mean, yes, the 10 paths apparently allows for Kashin Koji to see infinite possible futures, but none of those infinite possible futures involved what Boruto just pulled off. And therefore, either the 10 paths doesn't update nearly regularly enough, or Boruto simply exists as an enigma to the 10 paths, and anything he does can alter its predictions. And while this is kind of a reality that's talked about in the fact that anybody who's aware of the futures identified by the 10 paths is able to change them, which is why Kashin Koji is so hesitant in his sharing of the 10 past predictions with anyone, including Boruto. If Boruto's gonna keep changing the futures that Kashin Koji believes he's gonna see, then the 10 paths is, well, it's all but useless. Ties into the fact that Boruto may have some kind of future sight ability himself through his connection to Momoshiki that allows for him to usurp the predictions of the 10 paths, and it seems though Kashin Koji's only role in this story right now is to freak out about what Boruto's currently doing. But apparently Boruto's not the only person who Kashin Koji's freaking out about. As in the very next page, Kashin Koji says that all of these new futures aren't somebody else's problem, Ada, as apparently Mamushi, who's bug Shinju, is on the move, and Ada is his target. And we saw this in last chapter with these new 10 paths predictions. We saw possibly numerous Mamushis in Konoha, and we also saw that Daemon had gone off to fight against them. And thus it appears as though the next big Shinju battle we're gonna get is between Mamushi and Daemon. Because here's the thing, Mamushi doesn't necessarily mind fighting inside of the confines of Konoha. Well, yes, Jura won't do it, and Hidari also probably won't do it because Hidari doesn't really do anything without Jura. Mamushi kind of operates as an independent factor amongst the Shinju, in the same way that Ryu and Matsuri kind of moved independently of Jura and Hidari. And on top of all of this, Mamushi making a move on Ada and therefore activating Daemon serves as an incredible way to allow Team 7 to coalesce together and train to get strong enough to eventually take on Hidari and Jura. And therefore, I believe the next 3 or 4, maybe even 5 chapters are going to focus around Daemon versus Mamushi, while Boruto, Kawaki, Mitsuki, and Sarada, and maybe even Konohamaru and Moegi train to up their strength to be able to take on the 2 final threats of this arc. But how is this battle going to pan out? And what's going to happen with Mamushi's Soul Thorn after Mamushi is undoubtedly defeated? Well, we're going to be talking about all that and a whole lot more in an upcoming video, so make sure you hit the naughty bro. But all this talk about Mamushi and his side-laying self brings us back to the Shinju hideout, where Jura and Hidari are sitting like an old gay married couple, one of them smiling to themselves and the other reading. And Hidari, as apparently the mean one in the relationship, looks at Jura, who's currently smiling, sitting in silence, and says, "What's with that face? Are you feeling sick or something?" At which point Jura turns to Hidari with elation in his eyes and says, "Actually, Hidari, it's the exact opposite. Believe it or not, Kawaki praised me." Now, Jura's excitement in this moment, albeit is a bit confusing, because why would Jura care as to whether or not Kawaki praised him? And honestly, I don't know. Listen, I understand that Jura's trying to understand human emotion and what love is, but as to why he has a praise kink, I don't think I can explain. Now, apparently Hidari also can't explain why Jura has a praise kink, and thus Hidari turns to Jura and says, "Oh, this is perfectly explainable by a word I learned a couple of minutes ago," which also piques Jura's interest because he loves words. However, Hidari turns to Jura and says, "Disgusting as hell." And I shit you not, at the end of this chapter, the side text reads, Jura was just happy to be praised, but Hidari had to ruin it with one of his freshly learned words. Now, as to why we're doing sitcom bits with the 2 antagonists of this arc, Yeah, I don't know, but it is kind of funny, and it does give us a look into how their minds operate. And as Jura does seem to want Kawaki to praise him more, and as Jura fully admitted his interest in the concept of love, this chapter does seem to open the door to the possibility of both Jura and Tidari being reached out to in a kind of talk no jutsu-esque way, as the two of them, the older they get, are getting more and more humanized. Or at least Jura is. But at the same time, I don't think Boruto or Kawaki are particularly interested in reaching out to either of these two Shinju. And thus, this is probably why Naruto was packed away in the Daikokuten, because if anybody was ripe for the pickings of a talk no jutsu that Naruto could deliver, it's probably these two. But the new gen's got new ways to solve problems, and that way is with their fists. And thus, with that, chapter 24 comes to a close. So what did you guys think of this chapter? Do you think it was a setup chapter? Do you think it accomplished enough? And what do you believe is coming down the pipe for Two Blue Vortex? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to Disney tomorrow because my voice hurts and I can only record so much this week.